Welcome, ladies and gents, to the final Football Insomniac podcast of the series. My name is Colin Watt and I'm your host, and I'm delighted to be joined today by Derek Watson of the DWPodcast. Derek, how are you doing?
Good, thanks very much for having me on. I've listened to some of the shows previously, so it's a joy to be here and talking to yourself.
I know, it's great to have you on, and as you can see with the Christmas tree behind you, we're getting closer and closer to Christmas. Are you all prepared? Are you ready to go?
I can't say I'm that festive, even though I've got the tree on with the lights, but I'm trying to get there slowly but slowly.
And it's actually a topic we'll be discussing on today's show. We'll be discussing the festive football schedule, and we are live on Facebook, Twitter and on YouTube. If you are watching along, give us a comment, give us a shout out. If you've got any questions for Derek, do send them in as well. Derek, you are a Motherwell fan. How has that been this season?
Do you really need to ask that? This season, in comparison to last, I wouldn't say it's been a disaster as of yet, but it's going down that route, to be fair. Really disappointing. Obviously, we finished third last year. I'm not too sure if we would have had the season continued, but 2020 as a whole, as a Motherwell fan, has been pretty grim, to be honest. Really grim.
And obviously, your biggest talent, David Turnbull's left to go to pastures new at Celtic. Have you ever been able to replace him yet? Or do you think that's still something that needs to be done?
No, I think David's irreplaceable, to be perfectly honest, and I'm really surprised it's taken him so long to find his footing in the Celtic squad. I think that he's one of the hottest talents in Scotland at the moment, and I think that his future's really, really bright. I can see David being a stalwart for the national team as well. And I mean, not to go off on a tangent, but I had Keith Lasley on my own podcast previously, and even from speaking to Keith and other people at Motherwell Football Club, they really see him as the best young talent of a generation. It's not like he's just a talented young player. He's really, really special, and I think he's got a great future in the game.
No, definitely, and I don't think he's had the full chance to show it yet at Celtic, but hopefully we'll see that over the coming weeks and months. But this isn't a Celtic podcast, this is a football podcast. We're here to look at the big talking points of this week. We will be taking a look at some of the big stories, including Mikel Arteta's, which seems to be a never-ending run of defeats as Arsenal manager. But one of the main talking points, and something that's come out over the last few days, is I've seen a lot of word and discussion about fan ownership, and that seems to come from the fact that the Championship clubs especially are, as they are actually saying, they're on the brink of potentially going out of the game because of the funding that hasn't been received yet from the Scottish Government. I believe that's actually coming this week, not having the fans through the gates. And Derek, you're able to tell us a bit more about that firsthand because you're a member of the Well Trust, and the Well Trust now owns the majority stake in Motherwell, is that correct?
That's correct, yes. It's the Well Society that we're called, and essentially, we've been the majority shareholders for a number of years now. Essentially started up, I believe it was back in 2012 or so, quite a number of years back. And I think one of the challenges that we've had as a board and as a model for fan ownership is we've not actually been in a crisis point as of yet. So, when we took over the club, or when the society was first initiated, we were in an okay position. It was very much just we're trying to get people to put money in each month to make sure that the club at one point is owned by the people who care the most about it. And that, in my opinion, is the supporters. So if you look at other fan ownership models, it tends to be, as you said, when clubs are in crisis, they're rallying round to save the club. So it's great what we've got. We're now the majority shareholders of the football club. As I mentioned, it's owned by the people that care about it most. That doesn't come without its challenges, I have to say. I think it's important that we realise that we live within our means. We can't be going out spending millions of pounds on football players, or we can't be going out paying the highest wages in the league because, quite simply, we don't have them. I think what it does is it secures the longevity of the football club, and it means that the people that are running it aren't taking huge salaries or huge bonuses out of it each year as well. It's essentially making sure that we're stuck in the community and we're always going to be there.
So how did your involvement in the Well Society come around? What was what was ground zero for the Well Society?
Yeah, so the society was essentially set up when Leanne Dempster was the chief executive at Motherwell Football Club. And it was looking, I suppose, from a club point of view. They were thinking, how can we have a pot of money there that if we were to go into half times, we could use as essentially an overdraft facility for the football club. So we went out to the fans, and initially we put it out as a membership with different levels or different tiers, if you want to use a word that's quite popular at the moment. So we
topical.
Exactly. So essentially, we put it out, and you could be a platinum member, a steel member, or I can't remember, claret and amber member, or something along those lines. And depending on how much you paid initially, that's what kind of member you were. And in my opinion, it was the wrong route to go down. And I think in hindsight, we realised it was the wrong route to go down, because you'd have people who would pay, for example, £1,000, and you'd be a steel member. And with that, you'd get some benefits. So to be honest, they weren't great. You'd maybe get invited along to the boardroom once a year if you were playing the top level. You'd maybe get a Christmas card at Christmas if you were playing the bottom level. But essentially the problem was, once the lowest level was actually £300 to start up with. And once you'd paid that £300, there's no more money coming into the club. It's not as if there was a monthly subscription. You paid another £50 a year or so. But we've changed the model over the years now, and what we've got people paying anywhere from £5 a month up to whatever they can afford. And we've now got round about 3,000 members. Over 2,000 of them are adult members. We also have junior steel members, which we call them, which is kid membership. And essentially you pay £10, £15 to get your kid signed up, and they get benefits. The adult members don't necessarily get benefits anymore, but you're custodian of the club. You get a say in things that have happened over the years. So, for example, when Rangers went down to the bottom tier of Scottish football, and they were looking to get voted back into the top tier, the Welsh Society, our Motherwell Football Club, put that to their members, and we had a vote on that. In terms of my involvement in getting involved, the society were looking for a number of people to put their name forward to deal with the day-to-day decisions or the weekly, monthly decisions as well. And we were nominated by our fellow members essentially to be on the board there. So I put myself forward for nomination, and thankfully was selected. And since then, it's been really, really, really enjoying, but challenging as well at the same time.
So what is the ultimate goal for the Welsh Society then? Is it to basically see Motherwell into a more successful position? Do you see yourselves as a Europa League side? What is the ultimate goal for the Welsh Society?
I think we work very closely with the football club at the moment, in terms of the actual board. So we've got our own board at the society, and we have 2 directors from our board on the club board. So there's 4 directors on the club board, and we've got half of them. We're made up half of the board there. It's an interesting question, because Motherwell essentially will always see ourselves as a buying and selling club. Maybe not so much buying, but we bring players through youth development. As you mentioned, David Turnbull earlier, we've got the likes of Alan Campbell that are coming through at the moment, who's I think is a great talent as well. And it's going to come to the point where we need to sell them on. We've not got the resources there to be a Europa League club. As long as we are surviving each year and ideally staying in the Premier League, that is really a success for Motherwell Football Club. And we've been very lucky in recent years that we have actually punched well above our weight. We've got into Europe a number of times. We've got to cup finals, be that the Scottish Cup and the League Cup. But no, I'd say for us, Europa League's very much a bonus.
So you've obviously mentioned that connection between the fans and the club, and as a Celtic fan at the moment, I look at it and I see the disconnect that there is between the Celtic board and the Celtic fan base. You've seen it over the last few weeks where there's been protests, potentially people saying sack the board. Obviously now you are on the other side of that. You're part of the board that runs the board, essentially. Yeah. Do you think that the fan involvement is a key part of the success of Motherwell?
Absolutely. And you can take that right back to the bare bones. And if you look at Alan Burrows, who is our chief executive, his story in itself, I think, is remarkable. He started off as a fan, the same as the rest of us, just to get the train to away games and sit in the East Stand with us, and he went on and made a forum, which was actually called the Well Trust Forum at the time, a fans forum, similar that you'd get to something like Pie and Bovril or something along those lines, specifically for Motherwell fans. From there, he went to a pre-season trip, and I think it was Austria, and just documented, Motherwell's pre-season trip. Motherwell never actually had anyone at the club doing that. The club approached them at that point and says, "Listen, what you've done is fantastic. Why don't you come on and actually run the media side of things?" He's worked his way up from there to general manager. Now he's the chief executive, and I think having someone like that at the top level of your football club, who's been in the stands, with the supporters, who's travelled to away games, as I said, and who actually understands what the fans want and need, makes a huge difference. It's not as if it's just some businessman that's came from, be that overseas or somewhere in Scotland, and is there to impose his own influence. Alan's been there firsthand in the stands. He understands what it's like to be a fan, And I think every single day he lives that as much as he does the business side of things. Don't get me wrong, I'm sure he'll be the first person to tell you that has its negatives as well, because he very much wears his heart on his sleeve. And when there's a defeat, it's not as if, like us, we can go home at night and get a chippy or a few beers and sit with the family. You know, he's constantly worrying about the finances of the club and how does that affect the day-to-day running, and what about the manager's position, or, you know, is there players that we need to bring in or move on? So it obviously has its challenges, but Motherwell Football Club is very much, in my opinion, again, in the heart of the community, and it's run by the fans for the fans.
So you mentioned Alan Burrows, and obviously he is the sort of face of everything, being the chief executive, but obviously he is still part of the Well Trust and part of the Well Society. Yeah. So when it comes to a scenario like, for example, in the summer there, when a bid comes in for a young talent like David Turnbull, what is the process there then? Because obviously if it was Celtic, it would come in, it would be discussed by the manager, Peter Lawwell, etc. If it was Rangers, Dave King or whoever's in charge there now, and they would make the decision. Did you actually have a say on whether Motherwell should accept that, or is it just like, we trust Alan to do this and anything else, then we discuss it?
Yeah, I think the David Turnbull incident was a really unique one, to be honest, because never have we, certainly in my time on the Society board, or even in Motherwell's time in history, have we had a £3 million bid put on the table by any football club. Mm-hmm. You know, that's really, really unique for us in that situation, and that kind of money would make a massive difference to us. So in terms of that bid, as I touched on earlier, Motherwell are a selling club. We're very much aware of that. But yes, we usually rely on the board to make their decisions, and we trust them to make their decisions. You know, they're elected to do that. But in that instance, yeah, Alan did come to the Society board and he'd say, look, this is what's on the table. What is your opinion on this? This is what the board are proposing. And actually, most of the time, we're in tune with what they've got to say as well. You know, that they've done this for a number of years. They're professional people and they know what's best for the football club. But with a decision like that, where it's such firstly a high value of money, but also such an important player at such an important time in the season, you know, that's something we come and discuss. Yeah, so I mean that was, I think before David was even gone, we were almost thinking, you know, what can we do with this money? Which is terrible, because, you know, David's a fantastic player and a brilliant young lad as well. But I mean, in that position, we were thinking, is that a new training ground for Motherwell? You know, is that potentially a new stadium in the future? You know, that could really, really spur us on to be a bigger club, you know, and actually secure things for the future. That money's life-changing for Motherwell Football Club.
So obviously you mentioned the money side of things, but at the minute we're going through one of the most probably unforeseen times in Scottish football at the minute, with what's happening with the COVID situation. Fans aren't getting into the grounds, the games are getting played behind closed doors, we've got pay-per-view football. As we said at the start of the programme, a lot of the teams in the Championship look as if they could be potentially going to the wall. How has that affected the way that Motherwell's been run as a fan owners? Because when you look at it, the bigger teams like a Celtic or a Rangers, if they ran on a struggling financial time, you'd expect the board members like your Dermot Desmonds, like your Dave Kings, to come in and put the money in to help cover the situation. But obviously being run by the fans, is it then look to you guys to say, look, we need to try and find a way to raise money, or does it go out to the fans to say, look, we need your support during this time?
Yeah, I think we've been very cautious actually, because as much as it's a time where all clubs are in trouble, we've been very cautious in terms of going out to the fans and saying, listen, we need money from you, because we understand, you know, firstly as a community club, that a lot of people in our community are out of work, you know, that they're also getting put on furlough, that they've not got the disposable income that they used to have. So we had a bit of a debate with the Well Society actually, thinking, you know, should we be going out and saying we need your money or should we not? And I think the right decision that we made was we didn't. You know, we didn't say that to people. We've got monthly subscribers each month that bring in an okay amount of money. But Motherwell were very, very lucky as well in the fact that we got some decent income from the Europa League, which we don't usually get. I think without that money, it would have been a lot more difficult for us. But yeah, the Europa League money certainly helped, and from there as well. I mean, the fans have been fantastic. We've done quite a lot this year in terms of fundraising, both for the society and also for charitable causes. And you know, the Motherwell fans have really dug deep. We can't thank them enough for that, to be honest.
Yeah, and it's a fantastic success story, I'd say, so far with Motherwell. And we see more and more teams turn into this avenue. We've seen Hearts do it. I believe St Mirren are doing it. Closer to me, Greenock Morton are doing it. So I think there is a future for fan ownership in football. I don't know how it would work at a bigger level at the likes of a Celtic or a Rangers, but certainly I think for the rest of Scottish football it's a good thing, and it's something you've obviously would encourage more teams to do.
Absolutely, and you touched on it there, Colin. I don't know how that would work at a Celtic or a Rangers, because Celtic and Rangers obviously both see themselves as Europa League, Champions League clubs. As I said earlier on, we very much know that we're living within our means. We can't go out and spend a fortune in players or in players' wages. And we ultimately know when we get a player like David Turnbull or someone of that ilk that they're going to need to sell them on. So but saying that, it works in Germany. They've got the 50+1 model as well. Although we've seen a few clubs like your Red Bulls trying to break that, but it certainly works there, And if you look at Barcelona, for example, they're a fan-owned club as well, with a large number. So it can work at your big teams, but it would certainly be a totally different model to what we're looking at Fifth Park.
So I mean, it's a great story, and I think it's one that it will actually become more and more prevalent as the years go on. And I think the Welsh society will be an example of how to run it very well, and it will be one that a lot of teams look to copy going forward. And speaking of people watching on, we've got a lot of people watching us today on Facebook, on YouTube and on Twitter. Just looking at some of the comments coming in, Joe Porter here saying, can you imagine the emotional knee-jerk reactions and decisions of Celtic fans on Celtic? I think we just covered that there. Just looking at some of the other comments coming in, we've got Thomas Crowe. He's saying, as a Celtic fan, I love Motherwell. Stephen Robinson is an exemplary coach. I think he's done a good job at Motherwell, would you agree?
100%. He's done a fantastic job, to be perfectly honest. I can't believe that we've still got him. I think we're very, very lucky that we've still got him. They took Ian Barraclough to Northern Ireland, which was our previous manager, and I thought Ian was a great guy, but I don't believe he's got the tactical knowledge that Stephen's got. So every day we're grateful that he's there. Don't get me wrong, we're going through a bit of a tough time at the moment, but I think a lot of Motherwell fans are actually confident that he'll get us out of the back of it. He's a manager that, every single season he's got a rebuilding job to do.
Yep.
He seems to have done it very successfully. So, great manager. And I think that, he enjoys his time here as well. He really, really buys into the football club, and his philosophy is supported by the board as well. So hopefully we can keep him for a long, long time.
And Mark, who's a regular watcher, tells us, is it possible for supporter-owned clubs to be 100% transparent with their fan base? Have you ever had any sort of issues when you've been part of the board where there's a story breaking or there's a transfer rumour coming in and someone saying to you, right, who are we going to get before the deadline? And you're going, look, I can't actually tell you what's going on.
Well, as a board member of the Welsh Society, we all sign confidentiality agreements, and as much as you'd love to tell your mates or your family, this is who we've got coming in the January transfer window, or this is how much we've been offered for David Turnbull, we can't do that, and I think that people are aware of that. I think that where we're lucky is, people want to know, and I think Motherwell are a very open club. I think that the directors of the football club and of the society are all on social media, and they're quite open about where we are financially and where we are as a club, but there's some things that that you just can't tell. If it's a transfer, for example, you can't go out breaking that on Twitter, because it could have essentially got picked up because of that.
And that was a bit of the scenario with David Turnbull when he was going to make his move before his injury as well. It seemed to be the news was breaking on social media before anybody else knew what was going on, and it was on, it was off, it was on, it was off. There was pictures of him in Celtic Park getting interviewed before his transfer was cancelled. He's went through a lot, hasn't he?
Exactly, he has, and I don't know if there's any Celtic fans or any other Scottish football fans watching this that I've maybe not seen the documentary that the Motherwell media team.
It's fantastic. It's really, really good.
It's amazing. It's a 40-minute documentary or so that the media team put together. It follows his journey going down to London to get his surgery, and it just shows you, for a young boy, how determined he was and how much a professional he was. And actually to see him come back for that. And in the documentary, you see him going from the injury down to London to get the surgery, and it shows you him going back onto the park for the first time at Motherwell after his injury. And it's, to go through all of that at that age, and to go overnight from being a £3 million player to your dream move might not happen, to come back and recover and then go on and score in the Europa League now is unbelievable.
And it's a good transition point as we talk about the Europa League, because he now is in a Celtic jersey, and we can't go through this week without discussing Celtic's quadruple treble at the weekend. As a Motherwell fan, what was your take on the game? Did you watch the game?
I listened to the first half on the radio. In fact, I listened to both on the radio, both halves on the radio until 10 minutes to go, and I get back and watch the last 10 minutes in extra time and penalties. And I've seen a lot of people talk about it being potentially the best Scottish Cup final ever. I'd like to remind people that the 1991 United is the best Scottish Cup final ever. But from a neutral, it was brilliant. It was fantastic. It was. I think because as well, you thought it was over at half time, and to see Hearts have that dig, and determination to get it back to 2-2, something that I never thought that they would do, and it was really, really exciting. It was brilliant, and if you had to script it as well, obviously Griffiths was going to get a goal. I'm surprised Andy Halliday didn't score. But no, it was a great final.
Yeah, I mean, there is obviously going to draw that comparisons between the 4-3 game and the 3 each penalties, but it was. Certainly as a Celtic fan it wasn't enjoyable because the first half was enjoyable and then it started to go downhill, but it was, when you look at it from a neutral's point of view, it was a fantastic spectacle of football, and it's what you kind of hope for the sort of the biggest game of the season. The Scottish Cup final should always be the biggest game in the Scottish football calendar, and it certainly lived up to the bill. The only disappointing thing was there was no fans there to see it, but I think everyone that did watch it at home certainly enjoyed it. But if we take a look back over the 12 trophies in a row, it's completely unprecedented. There's been a couple of finals against Motherwell, especially 2 in the one season with the same scoreline, 2-0. 3 times Celtic have beat Aberdeen in the final, twice Hearts and once against Rangers. As a Motherwell fan, what do you look back on that period of domination from Celtic in Scottish football and take from it? Do you feel as if it had an effect on the fan base at Motherwell? Do you think it had an effect on the team, or when you were coming up to play Celtic, was it just a case of this is what we've come in to expect now?
Colin, I think you've got me on here to torture me and remind me cup final. No, I mean there's no doubt about it that that time probably won't get topped by Celtic in the future. Certainly now that Rangers are back in the top league and this season looking very, very good. Just touching on the Motherwell finals, the League Cup final in 2017, I think it was. That was when Brendan Rodgers was there. The Invincible season. I don't think we went into that believing that we were going to win, but I think the way that the game panned out, I was totally surprised, and I actually thought we were really, really unlucky. Keeper gave away the penalty with Scott Sinclair, which, in my opinion, was maybe a bit soft, maybe no a penalty. I'm going to get pelters for this now. No, and I was, after that, I was really, really gutted. And then I think Motherwell played Celtic on the Wednesday night after the final, and we thought we were going to stop the unbeaten run as well. We thought we were going to be invincible. And again, a penalty with Callum McGregor, which for me was a total dive, last minute of the game. There's no doubt that Rodgers had Celtic playing absolutely brilliant football, and I think that's where the Celtic board got this totally wrong. That's just my personal opinion. I feel that when Rangers went down, don't get me wrong, Motherwell done very, very well to finish second. Aberdeen done very, very well in these seasons as well. We were never ever going to win the league, and we were well aware of that. We were never going to win the league.
We've just seen Kevin Graham commenting saying Stonewaller and then another Stonewaller. That might be just because Kevin's a big Celtic fan.
I honestly believe that, just to entertain you here, Kevin, I believe that the keeper one was never a sending off, and it totally changed the game in the League Cup final. I'm not saying that we would have won it, we were still 1 down, but I thought it totally changed the game. Just to go back to that time, I think that Rodgers and Celtic playing amazing football. That was a team that, was no doubt dominant in Scottish football. But in my opinion, when Rangers were down in the leagues, I think the Celtic board should have invested heavily, and I think that they should be streets ahead to where they are now. In terms of the quadruple treble, you can never ever take that away from them. But I just feel that now that the situation that we're in, it shouldn't be that. Celtic have had a number of years when Rangers weren't there to be a bigger club and a more dominant club than what they are. And I think that if I was a Celtic fan in that position, I'd be slightly disappointed with the investment that the board have made. Not even the investment, almost the short-termism for me. When Rodgers went away, then replace him with someone who's just simply not as good, in my opinion, it was really, really poor.
Yeah, and I mean, if you take a look back at some of the games that sort of are the highlights of that 4 seasons, I'm not here to have another go at you, Derek. It's the 4-3 game at Fir Park in Brendan Rodgers' first season, when Colo Toure sells the jersey a couple of times to let Big Louis Moulton to score twice.
Right, yep.
And then the pretty much last minute winner from Tom Rogic. There's been some fantastic games over that time, and I think across football, when you look back at it in maybe 20, 30 years time, you look back at it and say, I don't think another team have done that since. I don't think we'll see this again in football, certainly in my lifetime, and we're pretty much on ages with each other. Maybe some of the younger viewers that are watching or some of the older ones will disagree, but I just think it's a period that is going to have a place in Scottish football history.
Yeah, without a doubt, and I think that's a very, very good point to take into consideration, because, you know, when Brendan Rodgers left, he got a lot of stick for the Celtic fans, rightly or wrongly, but ultimately the job that he done there was, you know, in my opinion, fantastic. You know, you can't. I can understand, you know, why Celtic fans are very, very annoyed about this. You know, he came out and he played the kind of Celtic fan as a boy card, but ultimately the job that he done can never be taken away from him. Mm-hmm. I think when people look back in that in a number of years, they'll understand that. In the heat of the moment, obviously, you're going to be angry and frustrated, but there's no doubt he done a great job. And you see how good a manager he is now, you know, down in the Premier League with Leicester. He's doing it again, the job that he done previous with Liverpool. It seems that he had a tactical knowledge, which, in my opinion, is well advanced to the Scottish game.
And when you were looking at it, obviously, with Celtic coming to Fir Park or you coming to Celtic Park, was there ever a point where you thought, this is where the run's going to end? Now, obviously, it's coming to an end now. The Celtic's been knocked out of the League Cup. They could still go on and win 10 in a row. But was there ever a point, was it maybe that minute when Scott Sinclair scores a last-minute penalty? Is that the time you thought we can maybe bring this to an end?
Absolute torture. You know, actually, that Wednesday night game when McGregor get fouled in the last minute and Sinclair scored that penalty, I was meant to be going to see a band called the DMAs at Motherwell Concert Hall that night. And for those that are maybe local or been to Fir Park before, the concert hall's directly across the road from Fir Park. So I was like, I'll go and watch the first half and then I'll leave and I'll go to the gig. And I didn't leave. I thought, you know what, we're going to beat Celtic here. This is going to come to the end. You know, Motherwell are actually going to do something special. And then in that last minute, when that goal went, and I thought, what did I not go to that gig for? Absolutely gutted. I thought, we're never going to beat them. You know, we're never going to beat them. And then the 2018 Cup final, I don't know what it was. I really don't, because Celtic were still a great force at the time, but the build up to that, there was something special about it. You know, that the whole town and the whole community were really behind Motherwell. And getting into that, I think there was a sense that we could win it. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, the game did not pan out like that, you know, and within the first half hour, 40 minutes, we were thinking, this is over. We didn't create any chances on the day at all. You know, we didn't deserve to win. But there was a real thought, and I think that was maybe because we came so close before in the 2017 Cup final, and then because a few days later, you know, at Fir Park, we almost got a result. We thought, you know, maybe this was our chance. You know, we've won the Cup in nearly 30 years. This could be our day. No, wasn't the case.
And I think it just showed that even when Celtic weren't at their best, they still managed to find a way to grind it out. 69 games unbeaten, 12 trophies in a row, 8 finals in a row. It's a magnificent achievement, and one I think that, as I said, I don't think we'll see it again in our lifetimes.
Not at all. And actually, I've seen somebody commenting there about Lincoln Red Imps. You know, I didn't know they'd done a quadruple treble. But it's interesting because, you know, I think we very much live in a bubble in Scotland here. You know, whereas the 9 in a row thing when Rangers won it, and now when Celtic have won it, it's here in Scotland, that's massive. You know, it's the most important thing in the world to Celtic and Rangers fans. And actually, you know, going for 10 in a row is huge for Celtic. But on a global scale, I don't know how important that is to other people. You know, and you can also say that about a quadruple treble. I think it's a remarkable achievement, especially the Invincible season. You can never take that away from them. But how many people in Spain or Germany or, I don't know, Italy or even abroad in places like South America are talking about quadruple trebles or even talking about Scottish football? And unfortunately, I think that's the joys of the modern game, that, you know, Scottish football isn't really seen anymore as this global force, which is a real shame. And a lot of that comes down to Sky and TV money and the way the English Premiership's been parachuted to the top and whatever else. But, you know, it's a remarkable achievement. But on a global scale, I'm not too sure. I just wish that Scottish football was still up there the way that it used to be.
And do you think that is an ignorance, or is it just the fact that we don't have the game as broadcastable as it used to be before? Like, when you looked at the teams, I mean, Celtic made so many European Cup quarterfinals, semi-finals, Rangers did the same, Dundee United, in their runs, Aberdeen won the Cup Winners' Cup, things like that. Is it just that we don't promote the positivity of this game, and stuff like winning 12 trophies in a row is something that we should be beating on about? It should be a massive achievement, in the same way that if Motherwell was to go in and win a cup, it's something that they should go on and on and on about for a long time.
I think you've hit the nail on the head there. It's a mix for me, it's the commercialisation it's got football in general, that it's now a TV show rather than something that people go to every week. You see kids here running about with Barcelona and Real Madrid tops on, or Man United, Man City, Liverpool, etc. Don't get me wrong, maybe we had those strips when we were kids as well, but not to the same level. But also, I think Scottish football, especially the media, should be singing up Scottish football. They don't do it enough. They simply don't. I noticed FIFA tweeting the other day, congratulations Celtic on winning a quadruple treble. But I think as well, in this bubble that we live in, people are scared to shout about how well Celtic and Rangers are doing at the fear of upsetting the other side. Mm-hmm. As soon as you put something up there, like I'll give you an example. My friend Gordon Duncan, another Motherwell fan, is on Clyde Super Scoreboard, and if he puts up, congratulations Celtic or Rangers, everyone's on him straight away saying, "Are you a Celtic fan? Are you a Rangers fan?" He's a Motherwell fan till the day he dies. And I think in the Scottish media, there's almost a reluctance to compliment each other. And also, I mean, don't get me wrong, we've had so many glorious failures in Scotland, be that with the national team or even with domestic teams. Mm-hmm. The Scottish game is really, really entertaining. In the way that the English leagues are beamed across the world, I think what we do not capitalise on is this, I don't know how to describe it, but Scottish football is hilarious at times. It's brilliant. And all these wee things that are quirky or make us unique, we don't shout about, and I actually think that if you really wanted it to be, that could be potentially sellable to markets like America or South America or even Europe.
And actually, it's a good point that you make, and it's something that we spoke about last week on the podcast, was the potential of a new Atlantic League. And the question comes in here from Mark saying, if the Atlantic League was to be created, would there be a place in the setup for Motherwell? Now, I know when Dave Cormack was speaking about it, he was saying that the teams that would be involved would be Celtic, Rangers, Hibs, Aberdeen and Hearts. As a Motherwell fan, do you think there should be a place there for them?
I think it's a really interesting topic, because I don't think it would end at the Atlantic League. I think that, and I'm not really sure where I stand in this, because I think it would really devalue the national game. I think it would devalue Scottish football. And for me, you've got all these talk, or you've had it for years, the Rangers and Celtic going and joining certain Champions Leagues, or going and joining the Premiership. And I wouldn't want that to happen, to be perfectly honest. I think that the national game is really important. I do think the Atlantic League will happen in some respect. But I think that what you'd find is, if there was something like that in Motherwell, were almost just missed out on that, because they weren't a club of that stature, you'd maybe get another tier, a wee bit lower, that teams like Motherwell would be in, with clubs from other countries that are maybe just not as good as the ones that are in the Atlantic League. So it's an interesting one, but I do think we're a long way away from that. Dave Cormack is a really interesting character in Scottish football, because when he came here, I thought his ideas were very, very refreshing. Good to see someone that's really talking up the game. And good to see someone that wants to take Aberdeen, to a force in Europe again. Mm-hmm. But I think recently, is stuff with COVID and trying to rush fans back into the ground. And this is my opinion; it will no doubt divide. It just seems to be, he's not got a regard for public health or public safety. It's just like his opinion's right, and he's not really. And he's actually got a wee bit of backlash for Aberdeen fans on that as well. But he does really see the benefits of cross-border football, and I think that comes from an American coming here and seeing, that almost in America, these American football teams, for example, are franchises, and it doesn't really matter where they are, because it is a TV show for them. Whereas here, what I think you need to remember is these football clubs are the heart of your community, across the country. And if you go to these Atlantic leagues, you can almost forget about that. I mean, there'll be a lot of clubs in the lower tiers that would just fall away. They'd just fall away, and what's the point in them? In Atlantic leagues, but they've been there for over 100 years. Teams like Arbroath, Montrose, etc. Mm-hmm. It's endless.
And we are live at the minute on Facebook, on Twitter and on Periscope, so do send in your comments, just like JR1991C. It's been good listening, boys. Thank you very much for joining us. And McGrory here is coming in with a point saying, it's the fact that most of our stadium are far too big for the average support that makes our game look so bad for TV. I've got to agree with that. Sometimes you're watching the games on TV and you're going, I mean, you could shut 3 of the stands. I remember times going down to Rugby Park and they would struggle to maybe fill the one stand. It's the same if you go to McDermott Park with St Johnstone. At Motherwell, obviously that's been part of the drive this year, is to get more fans into the stadium. I believe it's the way it's working at Motherwell, and correct me if I'm wrong, is for every game that you miss this year that you can't get into the ground, that's been given to you the following season. Is that correct?
Yeah, so that was something that the club said at the very start of this, and I think that was said in the hope that we would get into football stadiums after Christmas. So for every game that you miss, that'll be continued into next season. I don't know how that's going to pan out, because it now looks like it's going to be a full season. Don't get me wrong, we've made that pledge, and I'm sure that they will stick to it. But I think they'll, in my opinion, and this is just my opinion and not the opinion of the club, that I think they'll maybe be hoping that people invest again next year, because if you've got 3,000 season ticket holders that aren't buying their season ticket next year, then there's going to be a bit of a hole in the finances. It's a great pledge. It is a great pledge, and it was maybe slightly a bit short-sighted.
I mean, maybe there's another David Turnbull ready to be sold on. But we move on to our next topic, and Derek, every time I have someone on the show, I always ask them to tell me what their dream football dinner party would be. So for those that are watching for the first time, the scenario we have here is Derek is inviting 4 ex-players or ex-managers over to his house. He's cooking dinner, and they can be dead or alive, because for 24 hours we found a machine that will bring them back to life. Derek, the big question, first of all, without even knowing who's going to be there, is what are you cooking? What is your speciality?
Colin, you've obviously never been round to my house, because I'm absolutely... Is it possible to phone a takeaway?
If you phone a takeaway, I want them to sponsor next week's show.
To be honest, if I'm not an empty round, I don't want to give them food poisoning. I'd be phoning something in. I think my speciality is probably an omelette or fried eggs or something like that. So absolutely hopeless.
Well, we had Ewan Boyle on, who used to be the social media manager at Morton, and he said that he would make cheese toasties. Cheese toasties for him.
That's a good beans and toast. I'll go for that one.
So, who would be the first person coming round to the Watson household for the Dream Football dinner party?
There's absolutely no doubt about this, and not just because he recently passed away, but because he's my hero in every aspect when it comes to football. It'd be Diego Maradona.
It's a lot of people that say Diego Maradona. I mean, obviously he was an eccentric personality, and he was an undoubted talent. But what is it that really made him your hero?
There's so much, I was very lucky at the start of this year actually to go over to Argentina, because I love Argentine football and I love Maradona so much, to catch a few games, and that was in January, so I can't believe I've actually seen more games over there than I have in Scotland this year. But just to see the way that the Argentinian people love this guy, he has came from the slums, he's came from absolutely nothing, and he's took that country to the pinnacle of world football. And it would be unfair on the rest of the players to say this, but I think even the players in that team would admit he done it single-handedly. He carried them and he made other players better. And there was a belief in him that, and I think you see it. I don't know if anybody's watched the Maradona documentary, and it follows his career, but you see it when he's standing in the lineup of that World Cup team, and they're singing the anthem. There's almost like I'm here to prove people wrong about him. Yeah. And it's almost like he's doing more than football. He's got the weight of the world or the weight of the country on his shoulders, and I just think he's a genius, an absolute genius.
And he seems to be a name that crops up every time I ask this question, and I think it's someone that you'll probably not see again in football, someone that could single-handedly lead a team to a championship. As much as he's compared to Leo Messi in that sense, I think the only person in most recent times that's been able to do that has been Cristiano Ronaldo when he took Portugal to the Euros. It was single-handedly him that kind of led them all the way through. And yes, you just don't see those mavericks in football anymore. It's something that's definitely been getting less and less in the game.
I actually feel really sorry for the likes of Messi, because he will never eclipse Maradona in Argentina until he wins a World Cup. And that's regardless of what he does in his club career. And there's no doubt, if you compare players nowadays to back then, the fitness levels are better, the tactics are more enhanced, etc. But I don't think you'll see it ever again. And I don't think you can compare the two of them either. It's almost really hard, because football's totally different now, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. I agree with you. So Diego Maradona is first in the door. He's turned up with a bottle of wine and he's looking forward to the cheese toastie. Who is second through the door?
For me, it would probably be a toss-up between. I'll probably invite them both. It's probably a toss-up between Tommy Coyne and James McFadden. As a Motherwell fan, Tommy Coyne was probably the first player that I remember when I was watching Motherwell as a wee boy. My dad and my uncles took me along. Obviously, a decent international career for Ireland as well. But you know, for me, it was a striker that could score against any team. And similarly, you know, he made other players around him better. The Cobra, they called him, you know, and he was just a great player. And to see someone at Motherwell back then, you know, you never had many internationals playing for Motherwell. And unfortunately, it wasn't Scotland, you know, but it was great to have him amongst the team. And that was probably my first hero growing up.
So Tommy Coyne is number 2 and James McFadden's number 3. What was it about James McFadden? I mean, apart from the fact that he was basically he was Scotland's dream child coming through, and for me, I think he never hit the level that he should have hit, because I think he was a fantastic talent. Yep,
totally agree with you. And unfortunately, injuries probably plagued his career. James came through at Motherwell at a time where things were really tough, you know, and I wonder if he would have actually got the breakthrough that he did at that time, because Motherwell were going through administration at the time, and they had to chuck the young boys in. That's not to say that he wouldn't have got a game, you know, he obviously had the natural talent there, and he went on to show that when he went to Birmingham and Everton. Unfortunately, as I say, injuries really took their toll, but when he came through and he just played with such raw talent. It was like you gave him the ball, and you didn't coach this guy. It was almost like a kid playing down the park, you know. He'd run about, he'd enjoy it, he'd hit shots from anywhere, he'd dribble at past players. And he had this, I don't know if you all remember, he had this wee red stripe in his hair as well.
Yep.
And just watching him, you know, it was something different. It wasn't the average football player. And at a time where Motherwell were struggling and we were wondering if we were going to have a football cup to support, he gave us something to cheer about. Now, some of the goals that he scored for 30, 40 yards, he actually scored a hat-trick, and I think it was a 7-1 win against Livy. Done a wee Panenka as well, chipped it over the keeper, and it was almost like the perfect hat-trick. And to then see him go on to the national team, unbelievable. The goals that he scored, you know, the one with Fletcher stands out for me, where he took it for the corner. Wee back goal with Fletcher, and he scores against Holland. That goal against France, you know, to see someone come through the ranks at Motherwell to score that goal in the Parc de Paris, or whatever you call it, was brilliant. And I think without upsetting any Rangers or Celtic fans, I think to see someone that is a Motherwell legend going to be a Scotland legend at that level, I think it helped that he hadn't played for either team. You know, there wasn't a stigma attached to him like, he's a Celtic man or he's a Rangers man. It was, he's Mr. Scotland, you know, and everyone could get behind him.
And he did have his opportunities to leave Motherwell as well. I think he was linked with both sides of Glasgow, going to Celtic and Rangers, but he made the move to Everton. And am I right in saying that he came back to Motherwell towards the end of his career as well?
He actually came back 3 times. He's been there now. So, he went to Everton, and I actually remember I've never bought an English Premier League team's top, and I actually bought an Everton top with McFadden in the back when he went down there. And I think every boy in Motherwell was the same at the time. You know, we were really cheering them on. And again, I think he went for 1.25 million. Could be wrong in that, but at the time, massive transfer fee for Motherwell made a huge difference to the club at the time, and especially, as I said, you know, at a time where we were struggling. So it was brilliant to see. He came back later in his career, and I mean, as I said, injuries had plagued him. You know, he wasn't the same player. He'll be the first to admit that, but he still scored some cracking goals. You know, and he was there in the season when we finished second. Beat Aberdeen in the last day of the season. McFadden was playing that day as well. So to see him come back and finish second with a club like Motherwell was brilliant as well.
So we've got Tommy Coyne, we've got Diego Maradona, and we've got James McFadden. Who completes the quartet?
This is a strange one, because I don't know if I'd be able to speak to him or not, but I'd go for Marcelo Bielsa.
Ah, okay.
He'd probably have to bring his translator. But to be honest, I'm not really sure if he needs that translator or if he just doesn't want to speak to the English media. I think he's a character. You know, I've seen, I don't know if you've seen it, but I often see on Twitter, that he's just in the local Costa down outside Leeds, you know, doing his tactics. And the locals are going up to him and saying, "What are you doing here?" You know, as I touched on earlier, I managed to go to Neil's Old Boys earlier this year. and he's an absolute legend there as well. He won the league at them, and I suppose you could kind of compare them to an Aberdeen or Dundee United. They're not quite River Plate or Boca Juniors, and to see the way he's respected over there, it's brilliant, and I think he's a real tactical genius. If you listen to the likes of Pep Guardiola at Man City, for example, he'll always say, this is my hero. This is the guy that I base my style on, and I think that he's brilliant. What he'd bring to a dinner party, he does seem to have a bit of an eccentric side, but as long as he could try and speak a bit of English, that would help.
What I have noticed about him is you probably wouldn't need a seat for him because he's always crouching. I've noticed that when he's on the touchline, he's always crouching down, trying to see the game from eye level. It's an incredible insight looking at him, and I remember watching the Leeds documentary, and it actually went into quite a bit of depth about the history of Bielsa, and how much he's looked at as a god over there. But you've obviously got him and you've got Diego Maradona, so you just let them talk and hope that somebody can interpret for you.
If somebody said that, I'd wonder if Stuart McCall would be on the dinner party. I've actually been to a couple of dinners with McCall when he was a Motherwell manager, and I'd probably have to get him a taxi home early because he does like a bed.
If Stuart's listening, I'm sure he'll come in and comment and let you know that is not the case. But so we had that up, so we've got Diego Maradona, we've got Tommy Coyne, James McFadden and Marco Bielsa. That sounds like a really interesting dinner party, and you're serving them cheese toasties. I think that maybe the takeaway needs to be phoned.
100%, get a pizza.
So just looking at some of the comments coming in, Mr. Briggs says, years ago a mate of mine worked in Argentina for a year. He told me that Diego was literally a god. If he ran for president, he'd have been voted in the next day. And I think you're definitely seeing that with the outpour of grief that came from his tragic passing. And yeah, he's just Mr. Argentina, wasn't he?
Absolutely, yeah, and it doesn't seem to matter what team he plays for. I went to a game, and the first game I went to over there was Hurricane v Gimnasia, and he was the manager of Gimnasia. And the home fans were unveiling banners. He'd never played for Hurricane. They were unveiling banners, and rather than him sitting in the dugout, they gave him a throne at the side of the pitch. So the dugout's to the side of him, and he's elevated above all his substitutes, sitting on this throne. You're like, bloody bizarre, do you know what I mean? This is the rival team. Doesn't matter, everybody loved him, and it was great to see. And I think, as we spoke about earlier, it's probably because he's won the World Cup for Argentina in the manner that he done it as well.
And we get Barca boy coming in here. Outside of Celtic men, I'd have Eric Cantona at the dinner. I think everybody's really intrigued to find out what makes these eccentric characters tick, and obviously you've got Bielsa and you've got Cantona in there, as well as having some of your heroes. You think back at it, some people have mentioned Cantona, a lot of people have mentioned Sir Alex Ferguson. It's all these sort of legendary figures, and you just to spend a bit of time with them would be really incredible.
Absolutely, the likes of Ferguson and Cantona, I can imagine they've got so many stories to tell as well. And I think what I find about them, and probably similar to Maradona, is they seem really down to earth. They seem like, despite being placed on a pedestal by so many, they're still at a level, where they respect people about them, and they can talk on a level that people understand. Bill Shankly as well is another cracker,
And McGrory coming in saying, what's a dinner party? Is that something they have down the West End? I didn't realise. What would you call it in Motherwell? What's a gathering called in Motherwell?
I don't know. What would you call it? Come everybody around for a gaff, probably.
Aye, for a gaff, for an empty.
An empty, aye. I think there's dinner getting kicked, but I would certainly have everybody around. It's been a while since we've done that.
What about Tam Cowan? Does Tam Cowan come into the consideration?
I'd consider Tam. Tam's a good guy. I actually had him on my own podcast, and he can talk for Scotland, as I'm sure you know. But Tam's a great guy, but I'd get fed up with his rubbish jokes, to be honest. He's always trying to Instagram as well these days, so nah, he'd not quite make the cut. I'm sure it'd be a good laugh, but you'd get fed up with him after a while.
And that's actually a good segue to move on to discuss a bit about yourself, because a lot of people that will be watching this today will not really know who you are, but you've actually got a very successful podcast, the DWPodcast. You've had some great guests on, and one of the most high profile guests I see is Amanda Knox. How did that come about?
Interesting one. So for those that don't know who Amanda Knox is, she is an American girl who was a student in Italy, found guilty and then charged with murder over in Italy, and spent 4 years, I think, initially, and then 7 in total in an Italian jail. So there's a great documentary about that story on Netflix, and I was actually sitting with Natalie, my fiance, watching it, and we had a massive debate afterwards about whether she was guilty or not. I was under the impression she's 100% guilty, and Natalie was saying, nah, there's no way she's guilty. And I just said, well, do you know what? I'm going to get her on the podcast. I'm going to find out for myself what her opinion is. And she's like, you'll never get her on that podcast. Don't be daft. So looked her up online. Turns out that she actually does her own podcast now about true crime.
Mm-hmm.
So she essentially gets people on that have been wrongly convicted, as she would say that she is, and shares their stories. So it's people mainly in America, as you know, the justice system's slightly corrupt over there, and it depends how much money you've got if you can get off with it or not. But I just sent her an email, and I thought, you know, she's never going to reply to me. She did me at first. About 3 or 4 weeks later, I eventually got an email back saying, thanks very much for your inquiry. I appreciate you asking, but I don't speak to British journalists. And I was like, right, fair enough. But I just went back and I says, well, I'm not really British. I'd say I'm Scottish. And I says, and I'm not a journalist. You know, I'm just a wee guy that's doing this podcast from my house. Not in so many words. And she came back and says, oh, that's really interesting. She says, send me some of your previous ones. So I sent her a podcast that I'd done with my local MP and also with Mary Black, who's an SNP MP, and I sent her one with a band from Glasgow called Fatherson. The reason I done that is probably I thought she'd understand the accents for them most. And she came back and she says, actually, you know, I've really enjoyed them, let's do it. So where possible, I like to do podcasts face to face, but unfortunately she's over in America now, and I'm obviously in Scotland, so we set up a wee Zoom call and done it for there, and it was interesting. It actually changed my mind totally about our outcome of our trial. I don't think she's guilty, but I think there's maybe more than she's let on.
And so how long would that actually take to record? Because it's a long story, I'd imagine.
Aye, I think the podcast itself is probably about an hour and a half or so. And she was very open and honest, to be perfectly frank with you. You know, she spoke very openly about her time in prison. She spoke about the person who's now been convicted about it, who was a black guy in the area who was known for some petty crimes. But, you know, that was quite controversial as well. And I think in Italy they thought that maybe they'd just pinned it on this guy as a almost racial opinion, you know, because he's black and he's not got a job and he lives in this small quaint town that they think he was shifty. So the whole case is quite controversial. But it was interesting to talk to her. It certainly was, aye. And
did you manage to ask her what her favourite Scottish football team was?
I didn't, but I don't know if I should be saying this, but she did actually say on the podcast, like I said to her, when you were in jail, I see that you get a lot of fan mail from across the world. And she said that there was someone from Scotland actually wrote to her, but a lot of the time there was people from Ireland wrote to her. And she knows quite a lot of Irish rebel songs because someone sent her a CD that she listened to in jail. So I thought that was quite interesting that she mentioned the podcast. Oh dear, there goes my listeners. They're half confused straight away.
So that's it. So we're looking forward to our new Rebel song release over in 2021.
Rebel song album by Orlando North.
So how did the podcast come about in the first place? Just the DW podcast. What was it? What was your aim? Were you looking to do just kind of Scottish celebrities, or was it there a sort of sporting angle? What were you looking to do?
Yeah, I suppose for me, I've always enjoyed speaking to people, you know, like yourself. I enjoy hearing people's stories, especially, you know, stories that don't get out as much. And I think that there's loads of podcasts out there, so I didn't want to go down the route of, you know, specifically, I really enjoy music and I really enjoy sports. I didn't want to go down one route because I thought, you know, it might be a bit too niche. So at first I just contacted people that I knew and set up the podcast. So the first one that I done was actually Motherwell player who's still at Motherwell at the moment, Liam Grimshaw. Mm-hmm. Liam's from Burnley, and he was actually the captain of Man United under-20s when he came through the youth ranks there. Done the first one with him. Second one I done with Gordon Duncan from Clyde Super Scoreboard. And then from then on I got a few music people on. And what I've tried to do is say to people that I've had on, you know, can you recommend someone that you think I'd be interested in that I can get on in the future? And from there it's really grown arms and legs, and it's been really enjoyable to do. It's been going now for, it'll be 2 years come March. And I think my biggest worry was probably similar to anyone that's starting up a podcast is nobody's going to listen to this. And then to see people sharing it and other people sharing it and it growing arms and legs and picking up a bit of pace has been really, really rewarding.
I've got to say, I've listened to some of them and they're a really good listen. And as you say, there's a lot of people out there that are doing podcasts. You see the success of guys like James English, who's a good friend of A State of Mind. And obviously the stuff like football fans are doing, there's lots of stuff out there from different teams. So as you say, it's difficult when you're first starting off, and to see the success and getting guests of the calibre of the likes of like Amanda Knox, it obviously just shows that the podcast is continuing to grow. If you look at it, what's your goal for 2021? Who would be your dream guest to have on there? I know you've had your dream football party, but who would you love to interview?
Do you know, my dream guest would probably be Liam Gallagher or Billy Connolly. Both very unrealistic, but you just never know. And I just think the two of them are really interesting characters. I believe that, in my opinion, Billy Connolly is one of the last Scottish greats. You know, he's absolutely brilliant. Doesn't he do many interviews, to be fair? So the chances of getting him on are very slim. And I think Liam Gallagher would be challenging, but worth it.
Yeah, I think he'd be fantastic. I saw him on Jonathan Ross the other week, and he was very funny. But I mean, I can't believe we've actually been speaking now for close to an hour. It's absolutely flew by. And we had loads of other topics that we were going to discuss, but we are coming up towards the end of our time today. If you look forward, no, don't be daft. It's been great, and the comments coming in. It's been great to have everybody's comments coming through. And as Mark lets us know, you mean if you never ask, you'll never get with Liam Gallagher. So you'll need to see if you can send that email off. But if we look forward to the Christmas period, obviously, what are you planning to do? Obviously, things are different now. Not have as many friends or family around. Are you looking forward to the games? I think it's a big derby game coming up, Motherwell Hamilton soon.
Aye, we always seem to play them round about Christmas, New Year, and it's our record over at New Douglas Park and either at Fir Park as well is really poor. So it's the game that I least look forward to all year. You know, you've usually got a hangover to Hogmanay or even Christmas Day if it's on Boxing Day, and go over to Hamilton, soulless stadium. You know, 2 stands in a garden. And we never get a result. You know, it's always a 0-0 or play for 1-0. So I'm not looking forward to that in the slightest. We've got Aberdeen this weekend, I believe. So hopefully we can get back on track. But recently the form has been really poor. So.
It was something we were going to have, if we had time, we would discuss the festive football schedule. There just seems to be games every single day now, and it's sometimes it's great, sometimes it's just far too much, I think, at the minute. But yeah, it's certainly to look out for them. Derek, tell everyone that's watching where they can see you after this. Where can they find your podcast and where can they find you on social media?
Yeah, so my podcast's available on all the usual podcast platforms, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. It's on YouTube as well. Just under the DWPodcast, and you can get me on social media at Derek Watson 89.
And it's been an absolute pleasure having you on, as it's been an absolute pleasure having everybody that's been watching us over the last few months as we've done the end of season 1 of the Football Insomniac podcast. We will be back in January. Until then, there will be some best of season 1 clips coming out, and we're looking forward to having some great guests coming on in the new year. But until then, until we speak to you all, please stay safe this Christmas, have a great one, and we'll see you all in the new year. And thank you for joining us. And Derek, take care.
Thank you. Cheers for having us.